Yep, we're ready. Good day, everyone, and welcome to Oklahoma Voice. I am Jonathan Clour. Today we are in the KTLV studio sitting with Representative Mike Sanders. He is the Oklahoma House of Representatives member representing District 59. Mike, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I'm honored to be here today.
Hey, I'm thrilled you were able to come. We're going to have a good conversation about lots of different diverse topics, and I'm really looking forward to it. First, tell us a little bit about your district. What cities does that encompass?
Well, it's pretty large, Jonathan. It's actually one of the largest House districts in the state. Basically, home is Kingfisher for me, but the eastern portion of my district kind of starts 2 miles west of Piedmont. Go and pick up North El Reno down to I-40 and then shoot back up and pick all of Kingfisher County for the most part. Kingfisher with Hennessy, Okarche, Loyal, Cashin, excuse me. And then jump over, pick up Blaine County, and you've got Okeen, Watonga, and all of Dewey County. So it's Visay, Sealing, still going. Then I go up into Woodward and Woodward County. And so I split Woodward in Woodward County, then I go up to the city limits of Fort Supply. So it's pretty large, as you can see and hear, but I love what I do.
Well, that is a very diverse district, rural district, and I know anybody that has campaigned, anybody that has knocked doors, knocking doors in a city versus a big rural spread out district like yours is quite different. I know there's a lot of traveling. So what was your experience having to go to all these different cities in these rural areas?
Well, I'll tell you, the greatest people. Love Western Oklahoma, born and raised there. There's a lot of windshield time, I promise you that, because as opposed to some of the urban districts, which basically 37,000 people crammed in a 5-mile, square mile radius, and then mine, 5 miles won't even get you to my district or get you to my house.
Right.
You door knock, this small little town, and then you drive 20, 30 miles. Then you door knock this little town, and you may drive another 40 miles before you hit your next town. So, needless to say, those homes along the highway or out in the country, we just get them with direct mail or radio. We're not going to be able to hit every home, but we do hit our towns, obviously, and got great newspapers out there. It's such a uplifting experience. Those people will, salt of the earth folks.
Excellent. There are some beautiful people living out there, and they really do care about their nation, and they love their state.
Right.
And did you grow up in that district?
Yeah, I grew up, born and raised there. My mom and dad own and operate the funeral home there in Kingfisher and have since 1967. And I've got siblings, 2 brothers, 2 sisters. I grew up there, went to high school there. We all graduated from Kingfisher High School, I've lived there all my life. In fact, when I came back in 2008, one of the biggest selling jobs, other than campaigning for my job that I have now, was trying to convince my wife, whom I've met in Washington, D.C. when I was working there, bring her to Kingfisher America, because she, of course, grew up in Washington, went to school in Rhode Island, and worked in Manhattan. So you talk about diversity. Yes, New York is a lot different than Western Oklahoma, but she loves it, and so that was an experience in its own right. But born and raised there, and of course we've got 2 little boys there that go to school, and so we're very blessed.
Excellent. Well, hey, tell us a little bit about why you were out in Washington, D.C., and a little bit about your connections.
Well, I'll tell you what, John, I've always been involved in politics, and back, I'll kind of step back a little bit. When I was 9 years old, there was a gentleman who was working for my dad, and there at the funeral home, and he decided to run for mayor. And he called me up one Saturday spring morning and said, would you, like to come help me door knock and campaign? And of course, I'm 9 years old. I have no clue, no earthly idea what that meant. And I said, sure. Mr. Woodward, Forrest Woodward was his name. And so I said I would do it. And that also happened to be 1984, which I'll come back here in a second. But loved it. I mean, I learned about trash service and noise ordinances and potholes and all these wonderful topics that that aren't exactly
some of the less glamorous
no,
topics.
my gosh, exactly. But I guess you could say that I had kind of gotten bitten by the bug, and then during that time, like I said a minute ago, about 1984, that happened to be Reagan-Bush reelect. And again, I didn't know what a Republican was or what a Democrat was, but every time I saw President Reagan, whom I have pulled my political philosophy from, I knew that every time I'd see him on the television, I knew that someday, not necessarily president, but I said, that's what I want to do. I want to someday be a public servant and serve my friends and my neighbors to make tomorrow better than today. And so that kind of worked into, I started working for all the different campaigns locally, state Senate, state House, and had the opportunity to become Frank Lucas's field director in 1998, which then ultimately, with Governor Keating's campaign, Senator Nichols, Senator Inhofe, you name it, J.C. Watts, had an opportunity then in late 1999 to go to Austin, Texas. By just happenstance, it was George W. Bush's gubernatorial years, but he was also running for president. And so I had the opportunity to go down and work on his presidential campaign, and did that for a year. We were successful, even though 36 days of Florida, we weren't sure we were going to be, but you win some, you lose some. Sure. I think we won like 425 times in that 36 days. But anyway, that then ultimately, Jonathan, led me to Washington, D.C. And one of the greatest honors I've ever had, not only serving and representing my state, but also representing and honoring our country, working at the White House. And I probably, to be honest with you, probably had the best job in the entire city of Washington, because I was the director of the White House intern program. So I got to hire hundreds of kids from all across the country to work inside the White House. And still to this day, thank goodness for Facebook and Twitter, because that's how I keep up with half of them. Just a wonderful experience, because I was able to possibly start some careers in public service and in government. And I just knew that, God kind of called me in that effort, and it was tremendous. And obviously, I said a minute ago, my wife is from Washington, D.C., so I stayed in Washington 7 years and with the president for 7 years, and then came back in 2008 to run for my seat.
Very interesting. So, and I hear you say calling, so you do feel that is a calling in your life, public service.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you hear ministers, you hear firemen, you hear teachers, you hear other folks, and interestingly enough, you don't hear, at least I don't, public officials say, well, it was a calling, and not to say that that's not true. I mean, I'm sure that there are, but I, at a young age, knew this is what I wanted to do, and I have completely just thrown myself into working in campaigns, and 30 some plus, including my own, and I just knew that this was I tried to walk away from it once. That didn't work. Wow. And I just know that this is what I am intended to do, and so far, so good.
Wow, excellent. Looking back on your terms in the legislature, I believe you were elected in 2008?
Correct.
All right. What has been some of your highlights in the legislature?
Well, you look back, and I've always said that, I want to make sure that whatever bill that I file is good for my district, people I work for. 2, is it good for the state? And 3, is it also good with my morality, I guess you could say, my compass. And that's also kind of how I base my votes as well. But successes on helping reform our DHS child welfare system, which was a mess. I mean, you heard for weeks and months and years, children that were being abused under DHS's watch, and we were able to put, we got a long ways to go, but we were able to put some new guidelines there. Very happy that we were able to pass and sign into law bills to protect children from sexual abusers and child abusers. Very happy about that. Obviously, currently, I'm serving as chairman of the subcommittee on transportation, so my job is to oversee road and bridge funding. So I want to make sure that the rural areas have equal representation, and make sure that we can
those monies go there as well. Our volunteer fire departments are dependent upon chili suppers and not a lot of state funds at all. Very fortunate to have worked hand in hand in getting good legislation there. Those are some highlights, I guess you could say. But again, if it's good for my district, it's good for my state, and it doesn't violate my moral code, if you will. Then I feel it's a pretty good bill.
Wow, that sounds wonderful. Folks, if you're just now tuning in, we are visiting with Representative Mike Sanders. He represents District 59 at the Oklahoma State Capitol, and we're talking a little bit about his tenure in office and a little bit about his terms and some of the legislation that he has sponsored. When you are trying to make a decision on what efforts to push, and you say that you make sure you align it with your morals, you make sure you align it with what is important to your district. What else goes into that? How do you choose what you're passionate about and what you're wanting to take to the House floor?
Well, here's the thing, Jonathan. It's interesting because when I first got elected, I mean, I campaigned on good roads and bridges, quality and accountable education, rural health care issues, and reining in state government. And all of those are very important, don't get me wrong. I never thought about child welfare. I never thought about these sexual monsters and abusers of children. It just happened by chance, I guess you could say. Or, like I have said, I mean, I think, again, it was, a calling, if you will. And I think I was there at the right time when things were happening in my district. And I said, you know what, we got to fix this black hole or black eye. And I started to research more. And there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, there's one there's one way or one thing that when people have these grand ideas, which basically they're not always grand, but constituents come and they help out on that and they give us advice and things along those lines. But it is a process. So when you pick up a passion or pick a particular subject matter, you got to do your homework. If you don't do your homework, the chances of it surviving or chance of it being introduced or even passed is slim to none. So, and sometimes it takes 2-3 years to get a bill done. And that's okay. We all like to see things done more quickly, but sometimes that's the art of government. It may not be such a bad idea that it takes time, but just by looking at it and putting all the facts together, bringing in people for the proposal, against the proposal, trying to bring them to the table to figure out, okay, here's where you agree, here's where you disagree. Let's try to find some common ground.
Right.
As President Reagan always was, I mean, he was an 80-20 guy. And what I mean by 80-20 is if he got 80% of what he wanted, hey, he would take it.
Wow.
So, I mean, and is it perfect? No. But I'd rather take 80% than not have a bill at all that doesn't do anything. So, and there's always times you can tweak it and things along those lines. So
the art of the bill.
That's absolutely
the art of the deal.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Wow, very, very interesting. And I think a lot of times, folks, when they're a candidate and they're running on a platform, they're going to say, hey, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this when I get into the legislature. Well, then once you get in it and you actually start realizing what is on your plate and all the different issues that need to be addressed, I think it's probably a completely different story. And then perhaps your priorities are realigned. Is that a correct statement?
I think, Jonathan, you nailed it because, you always hear folks on the doorstep, I'm going to do this and this. And it's great to have those ideas, and I think you need to keep that as your moral compass, if you will. But once you really get in there, you have to realize that you have to work, in my case, with 100 other members across the state who represent a different group of folks than I do, and then 48 senators across your rotunda. So my job is to educate and be passionate, but yet also understand that the art of compromise is very important. And you keep your focus, but also understand that the process sometimes kind of prohibits, getting it all at once.
Sure.
And sometimes that may be frustrating for some folks. But for me, growing up in this, which by the way, my folks were never, they always voted and put signs in the yard, but they were not anything like what, they were 9 years old knocking on doors.
Sure.
But I just felt that, and I've always seen with my own eyes, through jobs and experience and listening to
great Republican leaders and other public servants. I just know that that's not always going to be the case. And I went into it with a realistic viewpoint.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I look at our young people. I look at the millennial generation. I look at the folks that are coming up in a different America than perhaps you grew up in, or perhaps your parents or our parents grew up in. What will be their role? What do you think the folks that are of this younger generation, what do they need to bring to the table? What do they need to be learning? Are they going to be living in an America to where their future is hindered? What is in store for them?
Well, I think one of the first things that I would say is, and you've heard this, Jonathan, you've got to get involved. You've got to take an interest. I mean, no one put a gun to my head when I was 9 years old and said, oh, start reading your junior scholastics in school, start paying attention to the news, and start reading the paper. I mean, that was self-induced, if you will. But I think today it's a lot different, as you said. And I'm on the outside of the millennial group. Because I'm an old guy, right? No, just kidding. No, I think that not only the millennial group, which basically have grown up on smartphones and mega PlayStations and the instant gratification of news and information, that it's a different monster. But ultimately, we all still have core values. I mean, I believe, and yes, there's generational gaps and there's different informational type settings and tools, but I think for young people to be involved in the process, because whether or not they realize it now at age 25 or 28, by the time they're 45 and 48, this will affect them, and they're going to look back and think, why didn't I get involved in the process? And I think one of the biggest issues in this world that we're facing right now is national security. Mm-hmm. And again, I think the economy. I think, once you graduate from college, what do you want to do? You should go get a job, and then by then you want to start a family and whatnot. So, you've got to have, in my opinion, you got to have a safe country, a safe world, and you got to have a job to support your family. So I think those are kind of getting into the weeds, but they've got to get involved, bottom line. And we'll see what happens. I mean, you still have, the millennial group is still one of the groups that least votes. And it's, I mean, when I was 18 years old, Jonathan, the first thing I did was go down to the Kingfisher County Courthouse. I was born in the summer. And I had to wait an hour because I didn't realize the courthouse didn't open up until 8:30. I thought they'd open up at 7:30 or 8. And part of that may have been I was so excited. But that's the first thing that I did. And again, I know I'm a different cat. But I think that some of this could start at home, I think, with parents. And then that will, I think, help or at least give advice and things along those lines. But I think the number one thing that these young folks have to understand is everything that is decided now will affect them one way or another, so you better get on the train.
Wow. I believe this Monday is the State of the State address, and that
Correct.
marks the opening of the 2016 legislative session. During this time, is this kind of a real busy, hectic time at the Capitol, or is everybody trying to get their oars in the water?
Yeah, exactly. I like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're trying to cross our T's and dot our I's. I mean, this last week we had our deadline of filing all of our substantive language and getting our bills officially filed, and there's a lot of bills that have been filed that actually, probably, well, good thing is they probably won't get heard. Okay. But then there'll be committee subs, the first week or 2 or 3 of session. So the bill you may see today is not going to be actually what happens in what you see, the actual bill. But it is absolutely crazy this time of year. Right. And it started really about mid-December. That's when things started to really, really pick up. And, once the governor gives her speech, I mean, Monday is kind of like the first day of school. You don't really do a whole lot. But Tuesday, I mean, the rubber meets the road. Right. That's when we start. And we have a lot of challenges this year. Obviously, everyone's heard about the $900 million
shortfall that we'll be dealing with. Lots of reasons why that has occurred. But ultimately, we have to balance the budget. I mean, that's our really state mandated responsibility.
Mhm.
Even if we don't pass one other state law, we have to leave the end of May with a balanced budget, and it's going to be tough. Some tough decisions are going to have to be made. But when you look at it, you have to prioritize your spending. You have to prioritize what really matters. And
Mhm.
you've heard the four core services of government: education, healthcare, public safety, and transportation. And as I said earlier, I'm chairman of transportation subcommittee.
Uh-huh.
My job is to oversee ODOT's budget, make sure money gets out to our roads and bridges for safe travel and for economic growth. So I'm going to be very territorial of some of the monies, and I think there's going to be some plans out there that I think will help with the overall budget. But there's going to be some that even if you take 1% or 2%, they're going to come screaming bloody murder, and believe it or not, they will survive. They will survive. So,
is there a piece of legislation that you're really excited about? Is there just something in particular?
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because there is, and it's actually, I don't mean to sound self-serving, but there's a bill that I'm filing that I'm very excited about because I think it's really going to be very important for our state, and it is a DUI bill that I am filing. And the reason why I'm filing it is because this past...
That's probably going to pick up some publicity.
Well, it already has.
All right.
The issue really started when my wife, this past May of last year, last week of session, as a matter of fact, was hit, rear-ended actually, by a drunk driver. Now, she was okay. Thank God for that. But what came out of that was the fact that this driver, this was his fifth DUI since January of last year. So he picked up 5.
That is unreal.
Well, there's lots of reasons for this. And I thought,
how is he still on the road?
Not only that, he had a driver's license and insurance still. But that particular case was because the continuances, his attorney kept continuing and didn't show up one time for court, and the other times he just had other things going on apparently. But what came out of that was the other research that I found. When I mentioned earlier about researching bills, found out that there were only 2 court of records in the state of Oklahoma, which means Oklahoma City and Tulsa are the only 2. What's happening is these municipalities around the state, when they get a DUI, they keep it in-house. That information never floats up to the district courts. Now, they're supposed to, but they never do. So what's happening is, as my research and talking to the district attorneys, talking to law enforcement, talking to even defense attorneys who defend drunk drivers, is that the municipalities, there are many of them that see this as a major revenue generator. And so the information is not being spread. So get this, as I found out, you could actually get 10, 12 DUIs around the state in these small municipalities. And in the one time I get pulled over in Oklahoma City or Tulsa or on the interstate, it will only show that I have 1 DUI, even though I've had 10 or 12 priors. That is a black eye. What I'm trying to correct is repeat drunk drivers. And so what we're going to do is we're going to fix that problem. We're going to make sure that the cities are talking to the district courts, vice versa. We're also going to, there's a tracking system that the law enforcement will have in their cars that will show prior arrests statewide, whether you get pulled over in my district in Visai or you get pulled over in Oklahoma City. It's going to show the prior DUI stops. So that's what I want to correct. It's a black eye. How many families have been decimated by repeat drunk drivers who've killed one of their loved ones? I mean, there's people that I'm sure you know, Jonathan, and that I know that have been hit by repeat drunk drivers, and there's no need for that. And it's a black eye, and we're going to try to fix it.
Wow. You think you're going to be able to get that pushed through?
Yes, I do.
Awesome.
I'm
Let us know how we can help.
Absolutely. Just get the word out.
All right, so we need to call our local legislators.
Absolutely.
And let them know.
House Bill 3146.
3146. Okay, now when you're getting ready to push that through, you let us know and you come on, and we're gonna give that some more attention.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan.
You're so welcome. And I think we've got about 4 minutes left on our program. So I'm really wanting to hear about your trip to Israel.
Oh my gosh, Jonathan, this has been the highlight of all my travels. This group, the trip was sponsored by the American Israeli Educational Foundation, which is a subsidiary of APAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. And I was selected with 11 other folks from around the southwestern part of the country. We had a couple lawmakers from Colorado, a couple of state lawmakers from Arkansas, community leaders down in Louisiana. And of course, I had the honor of going with Senator Greg Treat from Oklahoma City and Representative John Eccles, who's a little back west of where we are today. That's his House district. But we went, and it was the most spiritually trip. Geopolitically, spiritually, just the most motivating trip I've ever been on. I mean, not only you could see the Israeli people, who, in my opinion, are some of the most compassionate, some of the most caring individuals, which you'll never see on CNN or MSNBC. We were able to travel to the Western Wall on our first night there. We were able to walk on the steps that Christ had to walk up to get into the temple. We went to the Garden Tomb. We went to up to the northern part of the country to the Sea of Galilee, which is the clearest water I've ever seen in my life. We saw Capernaum, where St. Peter and Jesus lived. We were able to see the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and some of the political issues that are going on there. But what was great about this trip was it wasn't an indoctrination of, well, Israel's always right. Israel's always right. Now, what it was they stated the facts. And the facts don't add up or the facts do add up, but what you see information-wise on the global media doesn't add up. Because what I saw with my own eyes was the fact that Israel wants to live in peace. Bottom line. In many of their trades and many of their agreements with the PLO and different Arab groups and nations, they've tried to give 97% back to the groups, the Arab groups. But 97% is not good enough. You know, we talked about earlier about 80-20.
Right.
97% is not good enough.
Wow.
But I will tell you, they are happy people. We over 80% of the people who live in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv love their country. They're the most proud folks I've ever met, and just to be there, walking. The Bible came to life. Number one, the food was great. I can't complain about the food, but I was just very honored to be selected and to get an opportunity to see the wonderful things. The Holocaust Museum, wonderful. Wow. And one last thing I have to say is there was a hospital in the northern half of the country that would take care of ISIS and Al-Qaeda soldiers. They would drop them off at the border. The Israelis would go pick them up, take them back to the hospital, mend them, and put them back out on the battlefield. You don't ever hear about that, but I'm telling you, the Israeli people are just magnificent people, and I was honored and blessed to be there. Beautiful. That's right.
Wow. What a well-rounded journey you got to see. You got to see the people, interact with them, get to walk the steps where Christ walked. What an amazing, powerful experience.
Very powerful.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining the program. Folks, this has been Representative Mike Sanders of District 59. I want to thank him for coming on, and we'll be hearing from him very soon, especially when he's working on his new bill in order to stiffen our DUI laws. So, Representative, thank you so much for coming on Oklahoma Voice.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
This has been Oklahoma Voice with Jonathan Clour. Thanks for listening. All right.